Is Wayne on here?
He is.
He's oh there. Okay, I don't see you, Wayne. Okay. All right, Wayne, go ahead and start the live stream. Great, thank you, Wayne. Good morning and welcome to the spring business meeting of the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, this meeting is being live streamed to YouTube for the general public. The only time that this will not apply is if we go into executive session, which I don't anticipate occurring today. All audio and video is being captured and recorded, and in order to participate in the meeting, your video must be turned on. When you're not the active speaker, please ensure your microphone is muted so background noise and feedback is limited. If you need to speak, you can use the raised hand function in Zoom, and staff will help me monitor that. Finally, a new request for today, to make sure all council members are able to be seen on the live stream. I asked all CP staff members and other presenting guests who are participating with us in Zoom today keep their video turned off, as well as the audio muted unless they are presenting. And does anybody have any questions associated with that? With that, let's get started. Heather, please call the roll.
Mr. Ronald Beal.
Here.
Chair Ben Brandstetter.
Here.
Vice Chair Kim Hallbauer.
Here.
Ms. Lori Harper, and she cannot attend. Mr. Lucas Minzer.
Here.
Mr. Grant Mannix. Ms. Donna Moore.
Here.
Ms. Christy Nelson.
Here.
Mr. Richard Nelson.
Here.
Ms. Vijay Ravichandran.
Here.
Dr. Robert Satt.
Here.
Ms. Carol Wright.
Here.
Ms. Cheryl Zimmerman.
Here.
And Commissioner Kevin Brown.
Here.
Wonderful, we have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Heather. First item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The meeting minutes from our council meetings on January 23rd and 24th are in your materials. Are there any objections to those as presented? Seeing none, they are approved as distributed. Thank you. Before we begin our business meeting today, Commissioner Kevin Brown from the Department of Education is here today. Commissioner Brown, would you like to give us an update on how your offices and the P through 12 schools have been impacted by the coronavirus pandemic?
Yes, thank you. It's good to see everyone, even though it's virtually in our new, I think we're at the department, we're saying a different normal instead of a new normal. As you've seen through various communications, we started focusing the work of the department on 3 words around mid-March, and that's educate, feed, and support. Of course, the department continues to perform its statutory duties, and as does the state board, but we are really focused right now on supporting school districts as they continue educating, feeding, and obviously supporting students and their communities during this time. Around March 13th, when the crisis began to emerge, we had around 83 school districts that were approved and utilizing non-traditional instruction. And of course, those were for traditional snow days or maybe out for the flu or an ice storm. So that was less than half of the school districts approved for non-traditional instruction. It's pretty amazing in that in about a week's time, we were able to get all 172 school districts approved through a abbreviated application process to start delivering non-traditional instruction. I think the last district came on board for approval on March 17th. And then we had the last district start actually giving non-traditional instruction, which was Jefferson County, on April 7th. And that's because they took around 2 weeks to prepare their teachers. And of course, being the largest district and having other significant challenges with technology, with some of reaching some of their households, they delivered around 25,000 electronic devices and worked with some providers to provide hotspots, et cetera. And that's a similar story to other districts. So pleased to report that we've been able, and as you've heard the governor say, while school buildings have been closed, school has been open through non-traditional instruction. And the governor has been handling this by using data to make those recommendations to school districts as to whether to maintain the closure of in-person classes, and been doing that in 2 to 3 week increment, as you all, of course, have been keeping up with that, which I think was a really good way to do it. We did have a glimmer of hope that there would be a time that schools could open up for maybe at least a week or so to have senior activities, but our worst fear was realized, and that's just not going to be able to happen. And the governor, of course, made that announcement on Monday. And so we have all schools closed to in-person classes and activities through at least June 30th, which is the end day of the school year. The good news, though, is as I stated earlier, we have 172 districts, all the districts providing non-traditional instruction. And we have initial reports using data reported by teachers of a 93% student participation rate, meaning that 93% of students on average on these NTI days since March 16th have had contact, have had some type of participation using either the virtual platforms that districts are using, or we know that some students have those materials delivered to them through packets. And of course, we all know that non-traditional instruction using these means is not the ideal way, and we know there will be learning loss. We also, though, see some highlights and some positives in teachers being very innovative in how they're reaching students and striving to deliver services that are on IEPs through telehealth and other methods for those types of services. So there are some bright spots to that, but we all know that there will be learning loss. There's learning loss every year. We know we don't reach every child when we have a traditional school year with no school closures, and we know we're not going to reach every child under NTI. We know that a disengaged child during a traditional school day is likely to be a disengaged child using NTI. So those are issues that we're obviously aware of. We know that there is just going to be a significant impact on social and emotional health of students while they are resilient. And we see a lot of bright spots again on social media postings. We also are hearing anecdotal reports of withdrawal of students and older students, going to their room, shutting the door, don't want to really communicate, being out of the normal for those parents. I heard from a co-op director this week that she's hearing reports of just students and parents reporting that their children who are normally outgoing or more introverted and less active and could be signs of course, anxiety and depression. And so we have our consultants at the department. Dr. Damian Sweeney is our school guidance consultant. He's working through his networks with school districts, and we're having a webcast to reach out to districts. We're trying to redouble our efforts at the department to provide supports to teachers as we get through the remainder of the year, which brings me to the education continuation plan that we announced right after the governor's announcement of closure for the rest of the year. And what that means is we want all school districts to achieve 1,062 hours of instruction. That was in Senate Bill 177, which was the General Assembly's COVID-19 relief bill for P12. And that's obviously the intent of the General Assembly. We certainly want and agree with that and want districts to reach that. However, districts have been fatigued, and there was some push there by some folks throughout the state that wanted us to just call a day, whether it might be May 1st or May 15th, that we just go home. And we had a lot of discussions about that. We discussed that with the various representative K groups for the educational entities and role groups. And, we need to provide 1,062 hours, even if it's through an equivalent type of instruction through NTI. And that's exactly what we're doing. So every school district will be required to obtain 1,062 hours. The one compromise we were able to give them and a little relief is that we are going to count an NTI day as a 7-hour day. Under current rules, those can be counted anywhere from 6 to 7 hours or anywhere in between based upon a school day. There's not a difference really in NTI instruction from a district that has a 7-hour normal classroom day or a 6-hour day. And so what that does by using the 7 hours is allows some districts to end a few days early. So for example, Jefferson County, since they started NTI so late, they were going to go into June in their calendar to finish out their 1,062 hours. By going to the 7-hour requirement, they're going to be able to finish up the last week of May. Fayette County is similar. And so that addresses the fatigue issue a little bit. And then what that also does is give a few extra contract days for teachers, so districts can use that for planning for next year and have those teachers do virtual planning, virtual PD. Professional learning communities, of course, can meet virtually. So we're really encouraging districts to use those extra days that students will not be having NTI, but districts need to finish those contracts out to plan for next year, because we know next year will be a year unlike any other. And even if we have full buses arriving and buildings are full of 400 students, it's going to be different. The fear is it won't be that. The fear is it would have to be some kind of staggered schedule. But even if we came back in a traditional way, the learning loss, the social emotional needs, the different normal, as I said, will be there for the school year 2020-21. So there are a lot of bright spots. I'm amazed at how districts have responded. Kentucky is a state where the governor has simply recommended that schools be closed. There's no order that says schools are closed, but he recommended it, and our district responded within 24 hours. I think that's just a testament to who we are as Kentuckians. But we also know we have challenges. We're not reaching every child, and NTI was never designed to go week after week after week, but is the only platform we have. On the other hand, I think Kentucky was better positioned than most states because we have a history since the Education Reform Act through our Office of Education Technology and our education technology funds that flow to districts, that we were better prepared. Most all of our applications in P12 are on the cloud, and that's most states do not have that resource. And so there are things behind the scenes and down into the weeds that have assisted with this. But I will end with this. At our last meeting, Dr. Thompson talked about his tour through the state and mentioned about how he kept hearing over and over about students beginning college. They were, or other post-secondary endeavors, did not feel like they had great transition services. And then that is going to be a double whammy this year just because of not having those in-person classes. We weren't where we needed to be, obviously, from Dr. Thompson's findings through his tour. And this year, I'm really concerned about those transitions for these students moving into the following year. I know I took longer than 5 minutes, but I thought all of that was relevant for the council.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. We appreciate the efforts that you've been putting into this, and we look forward to seeing how you guys continue to work through this over the course of the next few months. Next, President Thompson, we've got comments from CP President Aaron Thompson. Dr. Thompson, would you like to give your report, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Good morning, council members and others who are joining us. It's good to be here. I will have to verify something that Luke Mincer said earlier. I never thought I could get busier than I was, and I thought I'd have some more downtime being at home. No such thing, but I feel blessed, and I hope you all do also. I kind of want to pick up where Commissioner Brown left off. Yes, there are real issues that we have to deal with in transitioning these seniors out of high school into college. And I'm sure if you want to take the time to ask a couple of presidents later who's on what they're doing and how they're doing about it, I think would be very appropriate, because we are worried about that. We're worried about how we give them information that they need in order to smoothly transition into whatever college looks like in the fall. And this is a concern among higher ed folk around the nation that I've talked with. So this is something that we're working heavily on. I do want to say the council staff has been working remotely since mid-March, as you well know. And I'm happy to report the agency operations are continuing with very few disruptions. Our IT team mobilized quickly to ensure staff received the resources and training they needed to work from home effectively and efficiently. They really had to work with me, I'm not gonna lie to you. They spent a lot of time making sure I could do this, even how to position myself on Zoom and Teams. We purchased additional Zoom licenses so we could hold committee and president's meeting as scheduled. And I am meeting with the presidents every week, by the way, and this has been very beneficial, I think, to all of us. The entire staff meets every week also. And I meet with the entire CPE group at least once every couple of weeks. And the executive team, we're meeting daily to figure out exactly how we need to do what we need to do. So I do want to thank my team at CPE, the staff. I've just been extremely impressed. I was impressed before, but I really wish you could see daily what these folks are doing. So I want to give them a thanks, heartily thanks in front of the council members. Our communications team is providing special coverage and resources related to the coronavirus. And we've created a COVID-19 page on our website, I'm sure you've been on before, that looks at all the campus decisions and policies as up to date daily as we get them, so everybody in the state can know what's going on. We also launched a special series on our blog called COVID-19 on Campus, which features special interest stories about how colleges are coping with the crisis and contributing to the efforts to flatten the curve. If you're following me at all, you hear me saying that we haven't closed. As a matter of fact, we are truly the cure to this crisis, I argue, and we're going to be the cure to the economic revival after the crisis is over. So higher education matters now more than ever. I especially want to recognize the tremendous efforts of our presidents and their rapid response to this threat. I mean, they have stepped up to the plate. And in fact, I've seen this team work together unlike any other team in the nation. Once again, I get a chance to talk nationally with folk like me and other people, and they are really impressed with what Kentucky has done, how quickly we responded. And I'm happy to say that I have a great group of presidents to work with. They are on the front lines. They're on the front lines of education truly, but also in healthcare, as you've noticed with UK and U of L. And they're working on the treatments. They're manufacturing PPEs, and they're also providing the online instruction, and every day kind of adding quality to that to make sure our students are learning and learning at the level they need to learn. So please know that my staff presidents that are listening to this, we're here for you whenever you need for us to be, and we'll do what we can to assist. Later on, you'll see 10 new academic programs have received the EEQs, the Essential Employability Qualities. This is the first like it in the nation to really look at how employability outcomes and these essential qualities are threaded throughout the fabric of these programs. So you'll see that QA Commons are the folk that we brought in to help us to do this. And there will be 3 coming from University of Kentucky. Thank you, Eli. 2 are going to be from Bluegrass Community and Technical College. We'll have 2 from Gateway, and we'll have 2 from Jefferson Community and Technical College. And we'll have 1 more from Murray. You may remember a few months ago, Murray had 2 that were certified. This is a very rigorous process. In fact, a very rigorous process. And it takes a lot of time and effort, but I want to congratulate those folks that have received this. And in June, you'll get a much more detailed piece of information on these. The Coronavirus Relief and Economic Security Act, which we call CARES, was passed by Congress in late March and provides much needed funding to Kentucky's colleges and universities and the students that they serve. Kentucky's public universities received about $68 million and Kctcs about $36 million. Now, half of that has to go directly to the students. And I will tell you, for those that don't know, this is a drop in the bucket to what these campuses are losing. But CPE issued some guidelines directing campuses to prioritize student retention and graduation rate while making the decisions. Even though this is up to the campuses to decide, many campuses follow those guidelines really well. So I thank you, folks, for doing that. Kentucky also expects to receive about $44 million coming to the governor's office. We're hoping to get a third of that, we've argued, and I think they're going to allow us to do that. The federal relief aid will be helpful, but it does not offset, as I said, what these campuses are losing. Later on, you'll talk to the president of University of Kentucky, University of Louisville, and our Kctcs president, and they're going to talk to you about what's going on. If you're following the news at all, you've seen this week the layoffs, the furloughs, the salary cuts, the variety of things that they're doing to make sure that they have a healthy higher education system in the fall. The item, I'm not going to be bleak here, but I'm not going to lie either. I mean, we don't know what this will look like in the fall. We know we will have colleges and universities open, providing needs for our students. We know that. What we also know is that we were already going into this year with the hope we'd get money, and it looked like we were going to. The budget ended up being flat, which was, we felt pretty good about that. But before this happened, we were getting some money in higher ed, which would have been the first time in 12 years. And so we were going in with significant cuts over the last 12 years, and this is not going to help any. But I will tell you that the presidents and I, once again, working with the governor's office, and we've been working very closely with them, as a matter of fact, that, we're going to figure out a way to make sure that we are viable. We're going to make sure that we're in a place whereby that we're adding to the economy of Kentucky. And Mr. Chair, unless you have questions for me, that's my quick report.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. I appreciate the appreciate the update and the insight for the council members and everybody else that's watching online. Next item on our agenda is the Finance Committee report and recommended action items. The Finance Committee has met several times over the last 3 months, with the majority of our conversations surrounding the financial impact on our campuses related to the COVID-19 pandemic and how that may affect the tuition and mandatory fee ceilings for the upcoming academic year. Because that has been the forefront of our conversations, I'd like to present this as a separate item for review and approval. Are there any objections to that moving forward? Thank you. As you can imagine, there are a number of factors involved in the decision regarding tuition and mandatory fee ceilings decision. Among the numerous data reviewed by the committee, we also discussed the financial impacts the pandemic has had on the campuses, its students, and their families. After much discussion, the committee has recommended the following be adopted by the council. The 0% increase in resident undergraduate tuition and mandatory fees for the academic year 2020-2021 at the public research and comprehensive universities and the Kctcs institutions. If extenuating circumstances arise, the council reserves the right to revisit the parameters as warranted. Additionally, the committee recommends that the public institutions be allowed to submit for council review and approval market competitive tuition and fee rates for graduate and online courses, as well as tuition and fee rates for non-resident students that comply with council policy and approved MOUs. At this time, I'd like to recognize Ms. Hallbauer to provide an update for all of us on this topic. Ms. Hallbauer.
Thanks, Ben. So just to repeat a little bit of what Ben said, on Monday, April 20th, the Finance Committee met. We had a recommendation from staff and much discussion around what a tuition cap would look like for the upcoming year. There was a fair amount of dialogue and discussion regarding the lack of information that was available to all of us to be making a decision around a tuition cap, and several alternatives were discussed, including foregoing making the decision or holding or postponing a decision until mid-year. After much discussion, the recommendation was made for a 0% increase or a 0% cap for the upcoming one-year period, with the ability for institutions to request or be considered for an exception if special circumstances arose. That being said, subsequent to the meeting, there were some additional one-on-one conversations and thought given to the idea that this is such a dynamic situation and there is such a lack of information available that it may be best for us to, as a council, recommend that for this coming year, the individual campuses meet with their boards, make the decisions that are best based on information and data that they have available to them for their individual universities and campuses, each institution would make a recommendation and would come to this council CPE in June to be ratified by the council. And again, that's for a 1-year time frame. So while there was a motion made to make a recommendation to council, I think at this point, our hope is that our discussion today will surround amending that and discussing the possibility that we would forego a tuition cap in place for any institution for the upcoming 2021 school year.
Thank you, Kim. Appreciate the update. And before we engage in any further discussion on this matter, we do have 3 presidents who have asked to present to the council on this matter. To ensure that they are given adequate time, I ask council members to hold their questions until I open up the matter for discussion. President Capilouto and President Bendaputi, I'm told you prepared something jointly, so I'll let you go first. And I believe Heather is going to be driving the content, and she just started doing that. Great. Thank you, Heather.
Chairman Branstetter, President Thompson, members of the council, thank you for your time today and affording us an opportunity. Dr. Bendaputi and I will present together, handing off to one another with Heather's support. Before I get started, I must express gratitude to Commissioner Brown as we prepare to accept an incoming class. We recognize and hear some of the same things you've been hearing. I know our partners in our P through 12 system, we have great respect. They're part of our hero club too. And I want to let you know we are sort of revising the way we look at our summer programs to further prepare students in light of some of the things you said. I also want to express gratitude to the University of Louisville staff and our staff here at the University of Kentucky who've worked together to put our presentation forward. And I have to stop and thank our faculty on our respective campuses and to let you know we're all in this together. I'm the 12th president of the University of Kentucky. I think I may be the first one that ever wore a tie with red on it. I do that out of respect for Dr. Bendaputi and the University family. To let you know how far this spirit is going, our faculty are working hard, for instance, on the COVID challenge. And my basketball coach, Coach Calipari, sent me a text when he read an article about some of the University of Louisville work that said, "Go U of L." So we all are in this together, and I'm proud to be part of Team Kentucky and get our presentation started. So Heather, if we go to the next slide. I just wanted to reinforce, out of great respect for our Board of Trustees, I'm sure President Bendaputi feels the same way. By statute, they are charged with strict oversight of our budgets and our responsibility to remain financially stable. They carefully scrutinize with great rigor and seriousness all aspects of our budgets. They choose our external auditors. They meet with them directly. They review their reports. They have oversight over our accounting, auditing, payroll, purchasing, capital construction. They approve our operating budgets. Any adjustments we make through the year, they approve and review. They carefully watch our long-term debt obligations, and they approve all gifts and pledges over $1 million. The decisions we make on tuition are the last ones we make. That's after we have found every way to keep education accessible and affordable. We did appreciate what the CPE staff had put together as a ceiling of no more than 2%. We want to work carefully with our boards to present them information on a granular basis for them to approve any recommendation that we may have. Next slide, Heather. The reason we would like to work with something as modest as a 2% ceiling and not saying that it's a foregone conclusion we'd go that far is for these reasons, which we'll try to back up with some data. Our demonstrated and continued investment in our students, improved student success metrics. I'm very proud of what we'll be able to share today. Over the last 10 years, minimal tuition rate increases. The last 2 years for us are the smallest back-to-back percentage increases, smallest increases we've had in 30 years. And then the student benefits and economic value uniquely provided as being part of Research One universities. All of this is coincident with some of the direction that we receive from state funding, especially performance funding metrics. Next slide. So we're awarding more institutional aid than ever. And I could share lots of data with you, but Heather, the next slide boils this down to what it means for an individual student. So at the University of Kentucky, we have well over 20,000 students. They're residents and non-residents. This slide reflects the residents. These are Kentuckians. And in any given semester, we have $6,090 in average tuition and mandatory fees. On the right side, that bar represents the different components of grants and scholarships that students receive and do not have to pay back. So I'll show you in a moment how this varies by family income, but on average, every Kentuckian pays out of pocket $1,219. We all know the challenges in some of the state grant and scholarship support. We, like the University of Louisville, has worked to beef up what we can provide through our internal resources. So 88% of these full-time residents receive some form of grant and scholarship. With that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Bendapudi, Heather, for the next slide.
Thank you, everybody. And I want to express my gratitude to CPE, the board, and President Thompson for giving us this opportunity. And what Dr. Capilouto said is so true. We all work closely together because on the sports field, we might be competitors, but we know that we have a common purpose of transforming the lives of Kentuckians through higher education. And Eli, I want you to know in your honor, I have a UK blue scarf on. Okay. So there we go. And just again, to quickly come back to this, and I will say, I'm sorry, this one other personal comment is how grateful I am to Dr. Capilouto for his friendship and counsel and mentorship to me. It's been, next month will be 2 years. So I have to say, I deeply appreciate that. So let me quickly take us to what's happening with UFL's undergraduate full-time resident students. As you know, about 80% of our students are in-state. And off of those, once again, you've heard the logic, so I won't take you through this, but of the $5,730, that is the average tuition and fees for our Kentucky residents, we cover $4,697, so that the out-of-pocket is $1,033. And let's go to the next slide. Eli, would you like me to start this?
Please do. I think this is a fantastic set of data that you're going to share, Nita.
Thank you. So we wanted to show you how the two universities contribute to better student success outcomes. And thank you to our teams for putting this together fairly quickly. If we could go to the next slide, Heather. This is a busy slide, but a very important one. We wanted you to see the student success results from 2016 to 2019, statewide, and the contributions of Kentucky's research universities. So if you look at overall bachelor's degrees, how much we've grown across Kentucky public universities, there were 916 extra, right, new degrees awarded. Off of those, we account for together 99% of the growth statewide. These come from UK and UFL. Now let's look at other metrics that also are important to CPE. If you look at the STEM and health bachelor's degrees, once again, if the statewide growth is 12.9%, we account for we've grown by 26.8%, which means that together UK and UFL account for 86% of the growth statewide in the STEM and H bachelor's degrees. A similar percentage, as you can see, in underrepresented minorities. This is a key focus for all of us. And once again, these two universities account for 60% of the growth statewide. Finally, I'd like to come to the low-income students achieving bachelor's degrees. This is a very, very critical issue for the Commonwealth at any time, but particularly now coming out of the COVID-19 crisis. We've got to give a boost to this particular sector. And if you look overall at the growth, we've had a negative growth rate overall, but the two universities have had a significant growth, as you can see. In other words, all of the growth statewide for low-income bachelor's degrees awarded comes from UK and UFL. Next slide. Eli, would you like to speak to this?
You can start and I'll pick up with the UK leads.
I just realized that. Yes, thank you very much. We definitely need to continue our investments in student success. We are covering that significantly. So I want to let you know that we launched our strategic plan after year one, and we have made a big commitment to increase need-based aid for incoming freshmen. Almost 40% of our students are Pell eligible, and we've got to put more money in to support the neediest, the most deserving of our support in order to create equity. We have made a big concerted effort to add student success coaches. As you know, for these students, they don't have the social capital and they don't have the financial capital. So they need that little extra push. So we have invested in tutors. Another thing that we have done is added to our student mental health services. This is a key need on campuses. Last year, we added 2 new counselors. This year, we're hiring 2 more. And we are really making strides in closing the gap. And President Thompson, I know, knows this and has shared this with you. We are really making inroads into closing the gap for degree completion. So it's one, this is not something we can turn on and off overnight, but it's something that we truly are dedicated to. So we're focusing on academic preparedness, we're focusing on financial preparedness, and we are focusing on a community of belonging. And all of these 3, we believe, along with physical and mental health, are the keys to making sure that students from low income also succeed at the same rates as the rest of the population.
Thank you, Neely. We too have what I would call a host of micro interventions that are producing these macro effects. One I want to focus on is our UK Leads initiative, which stands for Leveraging Economic Affordability for Developing Success. And Heather, if I could have the next slide. Through some extensive modeling, we're able to quantify more precisely how we would award aid. So we know that unmet financial need and the cost of attendance go hand in hand in sort of predicting whether someone is successful or not. So the cost of attendance includes everything: tuition and fees, room and board, books, travel, incidentals. It's all in. It can get up to, over $30,000. The total aid includes scholarships and grants from any source and any direct or subsidized loans. So we have information on all of this for those students who complete the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA, that you've all heard about. So I want to show you one slide that indicates, gives us direction of how we want to close that gap of unmet financial need. Next slide, Heather. So this slide shows the retention of first-year students. And you can see on the left slide, which is what on the left of the slide, which is what you'd want, high rates of return. And for those students that do not fill out a FAFSA, or who have, as you'll see on the x-axis of the graph, if you had $20,000 greater than the cost of attendance, you have nearly 100% chance of returning after the first year. You see that the likelihood of returning starts to decrease. And if you look midway in the graph, when you get to $0 to $5,000 of unmet need, it starts to drop precipitously. And if you get down to 15, 20,000, you're way below 40%. So looking at this data and doing some more extensive modeling, we know that if we can close that gap to $5,000 or less, we can move students up into the top left corner of this graph. That's what their percentages will start looking like. So we have, thanks to using our own funds, and now because of the demonstration of its effectiveness, the generosity of some donors, we have run pilot programs. I wish I had time to share the stories with you of how much difference this makes for students. But in a case where you would predict that a student would have, a 55, 60% chance of returning, we're moving that to 75%. So it's been dramatic. 10% of all our students in 2018 received awards through LEADS. So I will turn it back to Neely for the next slide, Heather.
Another, as President Capilouto shared, a third reason is that both institutions have been very careful about limiting the tuition rate changes. So if we could go to the next slide. We wanted you to see what the annual changes have been in undergraduate resident rates at UK and UFL, as well as the 4-year average change. One trend that I think you will quickly see is that at both institutions, steadily we've been trying to keep increases in resident tuition fee as small as possible. At UFL, if you look, in 2017, there was 0% increase. And then in 2018 and 19, we had 3.5% and 2.4%. I will remind you that in 2018, as soon as I came in, we had to take a 5% cut across the whole institution. And if it hadn't been for that small increase, it would have been very difficult for us to function. And if we could go to the next slide. We wanted to talk to you about the dollar impact of the 2% tuition change. What does it really mean to a student? And we want you all to know we are deeply concerned about the impact on our students and wanted to put some dollars around that so you could see that the impact to the student, what it would be. In both cases, it's in the low 200s per year. Next slide, Heather.
I'm going to review this information because I said earlier, on average, you had $1,200 out of pocket expense in a given semester. Neely had a similar number. But I wanted to show you the impact of financial aid, grants, and scholarships by income group. And this is for the over 8,000 students who fill out a FAFSA form. And that's usually an indication of aid. And families can have significant income, but if you're a family of 4 or 5 children, what your expected family contribution is certainly minimized, and you may qualify for a grant and scholarship. But we broke these group of students into 4 quartiles, our low median family income group up to our high median family income group. And in this low median income group, the median income is $20,753 for the family. So that group pays sort of net $184 less out of pocket. So there's no real out-of-pocket cost, and the grants and awards end up contributing $884 more than the tuition and mandatory fees. And as you would hope to see, and I was glad to see this, as the family income goes up, you pay more out of pocket. There's greater support related to a lower income. And these are dollars that someone doesn't have to pay back. And I'll close with one thing. We're going in the right direction. That negative $184 for the low median family income group, 3 years ago, that group paid on average $258 out of pocket. So we're going in the right direction. And Neely, I'll turn it back to you. I think your numbers look similar.
Yes, sir. Heather, if you could go to the next slide. And you will see, first of all, that the low median family income is $17,000 for our students. And we too are extremely sensitive to this. You've already heard the explanation of how this is done. So for us, you can see that for the people at the lowest median family income, that it's actually a negative $880. So they are getting more and not paying into our tuition fund. And as you see the trend, it's very similar at both universities. We're trying to be proportional so that the individuals whose family median income is higher actually pay more. So it's a very similar story, and you can see that this is a priority for us. So I guess something we're trying to showcase big picture is that increases in tuition really allow us to put back into those that need it the most. Next slide, Heather. Eli, do you want me to begin this, or you want to talk about this? The benefits to students.
You go ahead.
All right. We haven't practiced this, as you can tell. So universities, the benefits to students and the economy. If we could go to the next slide. There are significant benefits to the Commonwealth of having 2 R1 universities. And that is the fact that our students are having the opportunity to learn from world-renowned faculty. And as you can imagine, the competition for attracting and retaining those faculty is significant. Access to research facilities and labs. It is a knowledge economy, and if we don't have this, the state will fall behind. Our students are able to use cutting-edge technologies, and most importantly, we are very proud of the fact that both universities give our students the opportunity to have impactful research experiences so that they do not have to leave the Commonwealth in order to be exposed to these challenging and rewarding experiences. So you can see the numbers in the next slide, if we could go to that. And I'm going to brag on the University of Kentucky. If you look at, and the University of Louisville, we wanted to show you the dollars that are being generated, the investment that the state puts in. What do we get out of it? And that is significant in many, many ways. But I wanted to draw attention to the fact that we recognize the scales are different. If you can see at the University of Louisville, we're steadily growing from 134 million to 152 in 2019, and we continue to grow. And at the University of Kentucky, if you can see the big increases, and it's, I wanted to really say how incredible it is that we have an institution that's had a big jump. Is that the opioid crisis grant, Eli?
Not fully, but it's partially in there. So we were pleased that across the areas that we have set as a priority, most of which align with Kentucky's health disparities, cardiovascular disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes. We've been up in all of those.
But I think it's remarkable that UK got this when there are institutions all over the country that were vying for it. That's the point I was trying to make, that it's incredible to be singled out and get that significant investment for a problem that's endemic and really pernicious in our Commonwealth. So next slide.
Neely, thank you for mentioning the HEAL grant. And just to let you know, I know you have similar stories on your campus. That is a community-based intervention. So imagine in this kind of environment, trying to continue that intervention and measuring its success. So that group, just like all of us, has had to adapt to work with the judicial system, non-governmental organizations, judge executives, community-based groups and all, to continue that work. And I'm proud to say they are overcoming every obstacle. And I'll close with sort of where I started. I was glad to hear, I believe, from some of the information you shared earlier that you are willing to entertain giving us the opportunity to work closely with our boards. And we have much work to do and much data to share with them before we reach any determination about our tuition and fees. If we do anything, it would certainly be within the modest ceiling that CPE recommended. So with that, President Bendapudi, I'll give you an opportunity to close before we open it up for questions.
Thank you. And I just wanted to tell you that on research impact, some of you might be noticing the work that's happening at UFL that holds so much promise. Again, the researchers working together, we actually have the Community Co-Immunity Project, where we are trying to provide testing to all healthcare workers in Louisville, whether they work for us or for competing hospitals. And similarly, the highly promising, we shall see the work of Dr. Paula Bates in actually stopping the spread of COVID-19 by working with the aptamers, the synthetic DNA. So I just want to say, we appreciate your giving us this opportunity, and we wanted to plead with you on our very dire financial situation with the furloughs, with the layoffs that we have to undertake. So thank you very much for the time you've given us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Capilouto. Thank you, Dr. Bendapudi. I think this show of support and collaboration by wearing multicolor ties and alternative color scarves is a fantastic show of support, especially in these unprecedented times. So I think that shows a lot of collaboration between the two of you, and I think that's obviously good for the students, good for the staff, and obviously good for the rest of the state as well. Before we have any questions or comments from the council members, President Box from Kctcs is also going to provide some additional information to us as well. And looks like Heather, you've already got that pulled up. So President Box, the floor is yours, although I am not able to see you, but I'll find you down here somewhere.
Thank you, Chair Brandstetter, and thank you to members of the council for allowing me to be with you today and give a presentation. And I also want to give a shout out to Eli and Neely. As President Thompson said, this group of university presidents and I work closer together than I can ever remember in my time as system president at Kctcs. We have a great group, and we take into consideration the impact of our individual institutions' decisions on the other institutions in the state, because we truly do believe that post-secondary education in Kentucky, we need to be working together and not separately for the betterment of our students in the state. If you'll go to the second slide, please, Heather, thank you. So as we start this conversation today, I want to talk to you about how I and my team approach issues. And we always start with the question, what problem are we trying to solve? And as I took over as system president 5 years ago, one of the problems that was in front of us was that we were doing a pretty good job with access. We were having students come in the door, but we weren't doing as good a job of retaining students and having them complete credentials. I'm proud to say that over the last 5 years, we have totally turned that around, because the problem we were trying to solve was, how can we get more students through the pipeline and into a transfer to our universities or into the workforce? And in the last 2 years, Kctcs has turned out graduates. And the number of graduates, the number of credentials that we've awarded has been recognized as second per capita in the nation for 2 straight years. And our institution as a state system has been recognized as the 9th best system in the country. So we're very pleased that we've been able to turn around the completion of our students and increase that, and for the betterment of Kentucky. That doesn't just happen. You have to have good solutions. And one of the first things that I implemented was a 15 to finish scholarship to help our students as an incentive to encourage them to take more semester credit hours per semester, so they would get through the pipeline quicker and on into their next phase of their life. But today, we've been trying to solve other problems. When we started in January, our initial conversation with our cabinet and with our 16 college presidents was, how are we going to solve the problem of next year's budget? With it being a budget year for the General Assembly, we knew that we had to try to work with the General Assembly to increase and reinvest in higher education, since we've had more than a decade of budget cuts. And we put together our political agenda, working closely with CPE and our universities for a request that the General Assembly consider adding additional money in state appropriations. I'm very thankful for the leadership of President Thompson and his meetings with the different committees, with the General Assembly, and we felt like we were making tremendous progress. And then COVID-19 hit, and the state budget had to be changed. And again, as President Thompson said, we were very thankful that the members of the General Assembly decided to not reduce our funding at a time when they're having to deal with so many different issues. So What now is the problem we're going to have to solve? And that is, okay, how do we put together a budget without new state appropriations? And that puts us to tuition. Kctcs is different. The community colleges are different in Kentucky in that we really only have two major sources of revenue: state appropriations and tuition revenue. The other major part of our revenue is federal dollars that are passed through primarily onto our students in federal financial aid. So let's go to the next slide, please, Heather. So what will be the impact if we do a tuition increase on Kctcs students? We take this very seriously, and we look at the historic data, very similar to what you saw with UK and U of L, on as we increase tuition, does that make a difference in our enrollment? And it does not. That is not, as we've surveyed students and as we've looked at our enrollment trends, the years that we've increased tuition, we see almost the very same trend as any years that we do not increase tuition. In 2016, we decided, as our board decided, not to raise tuition that year. And we did not see any change in our enrollment pattern, as that was not a factor in whether or not students would come back. So let's go to the next slide, if you would. So what we are concerned about is what impact that COVID-19 will have on our students. Fortunately, through the CARES Act, Kctcs students will receive about $17.9 million in emergency funds. We have just turned in our plans to the Department of Education on how we will distribute that $17.9 million. There's still a little bit of confusion about exactly who is eligible and how much you can distribute to each student. But we do know that primarily these funds are to be used for helping the students of the losses that they've experienced during this year, and not necessarily be able to be used for next year. Our annual tuition for 1920, considering students taking 30 semester hours, was $4,368. But 75% of our students receive federal financial aid, and 67% of our students have no out-of-pocket expenses for their education. So again, we believe that a small increase in our tuition would not necessarily be a barrier for students when considering enrolling with Kctcs in the fall. However, there could be other COVID-19 impact. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So we believe our number one challenge for the fall will be, are students going to be hesitant to enroll because they are unsure about what kind of course delivery formats are we going to offer, face-to-face, online, or some kind of hybrid? Will they have concerns about a safe learning environment? Will they want to be in a class with 20 people in a closed environment? And unknowns about other issues such as childcare availability. As you know, so many of our students are adults and many have children, and that does cause us to have other concerns that sometimes the universities do not have to worry about. So this is a problem, and the number one problem that we're trying to address now as we move into the fall semester. Let's go to the next slide, please. So what has COVID-19 done to our colleges? We were very appreciative of Congress allocating about $17.9 million of more flexible funds for the institutions to use. We're However, we're projecting that our lost revenue and additional expenses that have accumulated since March and through the end of this fiscal year, we're going to have about a $24 million loss. So even with the additional CARES Act funding, we expect that we're going to have a net loss of about $6.1 million through the end of this fiscal year. So again, that puts us then to what are we going to do for a budget for next year? Next slide, Heather. So here are our challenges. There is no increase in state appropriations. The General Assembly did approve an increase in the dual credit tuition rate from 33% of the Kctcs tuition rate to 40%. We have approximately 20,000 high school students that participate in dual credit with us. At that increased rate, we'll generate an additional $1.9 million. But we've been losing $6.1 million in a net loss each year due to the reduced tuition rate in providing dual credit. So even with the $1.9 million increase in tuition revenue for dual credit, we'll still be in a negative situation with the dual credit. So we also know that we're going to have about $20.9 million in fixed cost increases in the next fiscal year. So, and we have very little ways to generate any additional revenue outside of tuition increases. So we're going to have to do some belt tightening, and we know that that's going to be part of our process next year. Please, next slide, Heather. We also know that some of the COVID-19 issues have required us to think about how we're going to deal with the students coming back on our campus. We know that we've got 73 campus locations around the state. We've got signage issues that we have to do, markers for distancing, health reminders, PPE for our faculty, staff, and students, increased requirements of our facility staff in cleaning and sanitation. And we're seriously thinking about how we reconfigure our learning spaces, especially our technical program labs, as we have to keep the students further apart from each other. We are moving to primarily a split online delivery of the majority of our classes. And for those classes who need some face-to-face interaction, we're going to be offering a hybrid environment where students only come to class periodically for a face-to-face lab experience, and the other times that they will be participating online. But all of that has a cost to it, and we're having to deal with how we're going to provide that, and especially with any technology that will be needed to support our students and our faculty during this time. Next slide, Heather. So then the tuition increase decision by the council. We understand that you have the rights and the power to set the ceiling and the parameters for tuition increase, and we do respect that. And we do understand that in your decision making, you are trying to take into consideration the impact on students. We also want to remind the council that Kctcs is not a university. Fortunately, we're not going to lose revenue from athletics or our healthcare operations because we do not have that, nor do we have dormitories. But we do have our own challenges of not being able to generate additional revenue from other areas. Many states, for their community colleges, they have the opportunity to generate revenue from a local tax, and we do not in Kentucky. So a decision to freeze the tuition will have a direct impact on our ability to be able to, especially what we believe will be necessary to meet the needs of the workforce once we start coming out of this COVID-19 situation. as we'll need to be retraining a lot of unemployed workers and getting them back into the workforce quickly. So next slide there. So my final slide says, what problem are you, the council, trying to solve with your decision on tuition? And I understand that you're concerned about impact for the students for this coming year. But I would also plead with you that you consider the impact on our institutions, as this will be a very tough fiscal year for all of us as we try to deal with the additional cost and the potential of lost revenue due to COVID-19. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. And again, Chair Brandstetter will be glad to answer any questions for the council.
All right, thank you, Dr. Box. And thank you to all for the contributions to the conversation this morning. At this time, I'll open up the matter for discussion amongst council members. I see 7 others on my screen. So Dr. Stat, I see you have a hand raised. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. That I do. And I appreciate the comments all along. And Kim's approach, I appreciate that, the idea there too. But as Dr. Box just said, we are just, our job is to set tuition limits or ceilings. And I'm afraid that with Kim's suggestion that we would be setting precedent with an open-ended ceiling. And that precedent, I'm not that comfortable with it. I'd like to have a finite ceiling, but one of the issues with a non-ceiling or open-ended is that we'd have to develop new metrics for evaluation of the ceiling in each case, and that's going to take time, effort, and significant discussion on what would be a legitimate ceiling for a particular school. So in that regard, I would like to throw my support behind what Eli and Neely suggested, as well as Dr. Box, that we stay with the staff recommendation of 2%, as a ceiling of 2%. Now, I want to emphasize that it's a ceiling of 2%. The schools don't have to do 2%. If some, like Moorhead, want to stay at 0, the simple statement can be, if they want to be the hero, let them do 0. That's not out of the question. So that's my comment, and my support is to go back to the staff recommendation of 2%. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stat.
So Ben, I would just,
Kim, go ahead.
No, I would just add again that, I appreciate certainly the time that everyone's taken today to make their presentations, but without the opportunity to speak to every institution, it doesn't seem that we have enough facts or information to be making a decision based on the individual needs of what each campus is faced with this year. And this year is very unique. It's like nothing we've seen before. We don't really know what lies ahead. And I'm very uncomfortable making a recommendation of any number without good information in front of us. So allowing each individual institution to make decisions with their independent boards that would come back to this board to be ratified in June seems to me a more appropriate decision to make versus making a decision that's an uninformed decision or one that's based off of hearing from three institutions.
Actually, let me jump in on that, because in the last day or two, I've had conversations with Aaron, who has been in touch with all the presidents of the comprehensives as well as the research, and obviously with Dr. Box. He indicated to me that all schools would be on board with the 2%. And if Aaron would like to respond to that, that would be fine.
I'm trying to unmute. I apologize. What we did with the original 2%, we actually talked with the campuses in fairly great detail. So we did collect a lot of information. What the proposal we presented at the Finance Committee was in conjunction with a lot of other discussions with a lot of our people and the CBOs as well as the president. So what we brought to you in the total staff recommendation was what we felt comfortable with based on the information we had heard from all sides, while keeping the affordability for students in mind. So this was a very detailed, with the information we have. Let me be clear, this is an unprecedented year. I mean, we did not feel fully comfortable with having all the things we thought we needed to have. So I don't pretend that we did. So if I had some predictive variables, it would, like we've had in the past, I'd feel even more comfortable with anything we did. But what we gave to you was the best thinking of a lot of different minds with the staff recommendation. Once again, even as I told the Finance Committee, I had many people on my staff that felt even uncomfortable with the 2% ceiling. But we felt as a staff that was the best protocol to put forth in covering all territories.
Did you?
Thank you. Thank you to the presidents who gave us that presentation. Very helpful and very informative. Before making a recommendation one way or another, I just had some clarifying questions. I know you all are probably doing multiple scenario planning right now. So it's really, the question is more around, have you looked at models that look at, obviously, students coming back in force in the fall, which is starting to look more and more unlikely. So Dr. Box talked about sort of a phased-in model where you have, different days of instruction for different students. I know that's a little bit more challenging at U of L and UK, given the student population. And what happens if students don't come back at all in the fall and need to wait it out until spring of 2021? So my question is really more around, what does tuition look like if we are in a situation that is primarily all virtual? And what does tuition look like if you have a situation where it's partially, maybe you have a delayed start, maybe the CDC recommends not going back in August, but going back in November. We don't know. This is so difficult to plan for, but we'd love to hear some thoughts around how you've done scenario planning. So it gives us a little bit more context. I think people are really kind of struggling more with the context right now, as opposed to just approving what's on the table in front of us. So any background information would be greatly helpful as to how you're thinking through the process of getting to this place.
I'm happy to start. I will tell you that this is a very difficult situation, and Inside Higher Education, which is one of our trade publications, recently published an article that said 15 scenarios to plan for.
I saw that, yeah.
Did you? Yeah, so what we are doing is actually going through the process of trying to predict what would happen. For our university, certainly, we do need to factor in what happens on the healthcare side and athletic side, as Dr. Box said, the additional complexities. In any case, one of the things we know is that there will be some impact on revenue. As you said, even if everything is okay, I think that in the fall, we will all see some reticence from students, and summer will be a good test. We've taken all of our classes online for the summer, and were the first to do so because we thought, let's remove the uncertainty for faculty, staff, and students. So the best answer I can give you now is that internally, we are modeling what happens if it's 100% everybody comes back. What if it is we start, but then there is a spike, and so we have to move for a week or two back to virtual or online. That's the problem here, right? It's not even just whether we start the fall, whether we start on time. We're looking at what happens Dr. Thompson and all of our fellow presidents are talking about it. So it's really every contingency out there, and within each, we're trying to do what is the most likely, what's worst case, what's best case.
This is Jay. We are also doing many different scenarios, many different models. Primarily, what we're trying to do is make sure that we can take the emotional decision out of the formula, out of the consideration. Because right now we believe there's this doubt with potential students and returning students, this doubt of whether or not it's safe to come back, this doubt of whether they can learn in a purely online environment, this doubt that we will provide them the wraparound student services that they'll be able to need, this doubt whether they'll be able to have access to internet, this doubt if they have the technology that will be required. So in our scenario planning, we're trying to be able to work through each one of those scenarios and see if those questions can be answered. And then what we are then going to roll out, not probably until June, will be a marketing campaign, a promotional campaign that shows how we're going to address those concerns of the student learner.
I would only add, to give you a little more context and background, that we stood up an emergency operations center the last week in January when we first heard about the cases. We're a globalized education system with people traveling all over the world and coming from spots all over the world. So we were alerted and started then dealing with what were just a few matters. Just to let you know, our emergency operations center now has 19 work streams, and they address a whole wide range of matters. They work vertically. They then have to integrate, and decisions work their way up to me. We're planning moment to moment, given how things change. Some things that we thought would be good 2 days ago, we've had to be flexible, agile, adjust. But we've done everything from in a month's time, convert thousands of courses, reached out to 30,000 students, set up a field hospital for 400, and now have it fully staffed should it need to be called into service. So I'm very proud of our team. We're building a bridge as we're crossing it. But every scenario that you can imagine, we're now shifting all our teams in that direction. When you look at, our goal is to open safe and normal, and there are degrees of that. 4 things that you got to control and get your hands around are testing, isolation, which can be from social distancing to personal physical equipment that one would wear to protect themselves. Then you've got to be able to quarantine if need be, and within that, some sort of contact tracing. So imagine doing that across 40,000 hospitalizations in a year, 1.8 million physician visits, 120 counties of extension service. So it's a great deal of complexity, but I want to tell you that we have a system and a structure that has produced, and I think we will carefully evaluate every scenario.
If I may add, thank you. If I may add one last thing is that we're also looking at, we have the capacity to do over 1,000 antibody tests a day. And that will be key, not whether you have it or not, but to see whether you have had it. And will we have we don't have to be dependent on kits because it's a lab-based test. We're even talking about, if we do that, the complexity. Can we ensure that every single faculty member, staff member, and student gets that? And how do we control who comes on campus and who does not? So I agree. It's just, we're trying our best. And one last thing is all of us are participating in national dialogues as well to learn not just from one another, but what our peers are doing.
Well, I'm sure you've seen this as sort of an emerging trend. There's a lot of talk, at least among student communities and parent communities, about whether tuition needs to look the same if you are in an all virtual world, which kind of comes back directly to the conversation we're having. If we do end up in a situation where we are in a virtual environment, I think we, all of us, this board, the presidents, we need to be thinking about what does it look like if there's a lot of pressure from students and families to no longer be charging the same kind of tuition, because this is an active dialogue that's happening nationally in a lot of places. So just from a scenario planning, financial scenario planning standpoint, it's just something to keep in mind and to be thinking about. Not that we have answers, but it's just something that may come in front of this board again, in front of your finance teams at some point in the not too distant future.
Well, I will add that going virtual doesn't mean that it costs less.
It's actually costs more.
And
I agree. It's a perception and a problem among the students and the families, because everybody's struggling and everybody's trying to find a place to, pass that responsibility on to. We all know what it costs, and the overhead is very significant to going online.
Vidya, this is Bob Stat, and in the Finance Committee, we are starting to look at that, and Bill Payne is helping us gather some data on it so that we can come up with a better statement at least.
Dr. Thompson, I'll let you add something before I go to Christy Nelson.
Yes, I just want to point out also, this is just not about instruction. To some degree, it'd be great if it was. This is also about figuring out how we give those wraparound services, especially mental health needs, which now more than ever that our students are going to be relying on in a virtual way. So we're having that conversation too. These are items that were in place, as Commissioner Brown said, before all this happened, but now are in place more. As we talk about virtual learning, we're also talking about virtual assistance. So I would also have our council to think about that. And the Finance Committee, as Dr. Stat said, it is picking that conversation up. But as we talk about costs, as we talk about delivery, I would not want us to be too cavalier about some of the biggest issues we have to deal with, or our campuses have to deal with, for all the needs that our students have beyond just the classroom.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Christy Nelson?
I just want to say, wow, I am incredibly impressed with the pandemic response. I mean, of our research institutions, just listening to Dr. Capilouto, that is, I only wish for our nation that we had him leading us in a united effort, the way that he has at UK, and I'm sure the same at U of L with our strong president there. Very impressive. I'm supportive of voting for no cap, and we just listened to universities who have managed through the most difficult circumstances that many universities will ever find themselves. I mean, there are universities closing down. The face of higher ed coming out of this will be different, just as it will in corporate America, every facet of our life. And I think Aaron has already talked to all the universities who agree that they're not going to go beyond the 2%. And as a practical matter, any number of universities have already announced they're going to do 0. And I mean, I think if we entrust these universities to manage through a pandemic, we can entrust them to take the appropriate action on their tuition setting. I think we have not done the thorough review that we typically do for tuition setting. These circumstances have created an extraordinary situation that we find ourselves in. And I think that, to Kim's point, I would want to do a deeper dive for us to make an informed, educated recommendation to set tuition. I do not think that we undermine the charge or responsibility of this organization by simply recognizing that we are in an unprecedented period in our global history, and I'm supportive of allowing these universities to make a determination as to what they think is appropriate. The other comment that I just want to make is, I think it was a year, maybe 2 years ago, when we were all sitting watching President Crow from Arizona State give his presentation on the new American University. And one of the things that Arizona State has done is they have proliferated online education. And I am thoroughly impressed with how quickly everyone has stood up online capabilities, especially at our research institutions represented here today. But I would say that this pandemic is a wake-up call that many of our universities and colleges across Kentucky have been asleep at the wheel and making an excuse that we can't do that in Kentucky. I'm not talking about U of L and UK particularly, but this is a time for pivot. It is a time, it's a gut check time. It is for everything. It's across, industries, across everything, because this is going to be a transformative moment. And I'm thrilled to death with the way additional expense or otherwise that we are adapting, because we cannot continue to say we can't. I remember going to the breakout room after hearing President Crow speak, and people in there from colleges and universities that will remain unnamed saying we can never do that in Kentucky. We can't make excuses. People are changing, and and universities and colleges are changing, and the people that we want to educate are changing, and we have to change with it. So as much as this is a huge burden and a tremendously stressful time for everyone, there is good that is going to come out of this. There already is. And again, hats off to, oh my gosh, I'm just so impressed with the pivot that our leaders have made with the support of the universities, our legislators, CPE leadership, everyone. But I am in support of allowing these astute, duly qualified people to make their own decision this year. And I will end with that.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate the insight and perspective from you. Cheryl Zimmerman, I think you'd like to go next, and you're unmuted now.
Thank you. First of all, I am not in favor of the recommendation from the Finance Committee at all to give no leeway whatsoever to universities for increasing tuition or fees or whatever. I feel like we are in unprecedented times. We do not know the intricacies of running their universities, and it is an unprecedented time. And I think for a 1 year to allow universities to let them submit to us what they feel their university needs, where they've got the deep dive into everything that's going on at their university that we have no idea about. I'm very much in support of a no cap and letting the people that know their universities best and their boards of trustees or to make that decision for them. And they would come back to us with proposals that we still have an opportunity to talk with them if there are questions that we have about what decisions they're trying to make before they become carved in stone, so to speak.
Thank you, Cheryl. Are there any other council members? I don't see anybody with their hand raised right now. So
Ben, sorry, I thought I raised my hand.
Oh, Go ahead, Kim.
So appreciate the conversation, and I would like to make a motion that this council approve a no cap policy for 1 year for tuition increases for the 1 year time frame for this upcoming fiscal year, to give the universities the flexibility needed to make the decisions that are in the best interest of their campuses.
I second that.
Who was the second? I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Vidya.
Oh, Vidya. Okay, good. Thank you. Kim, just to clarify, the CPE would still come back at our June meeting and ratify those individual board of trustee, board of regent decisions, correct?
Yeah, I think that's part of the
Okay.
policy anyway, correct?
Yes. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that on there. We have a motion, we have a second. Is there any further discussion on this? Carol, I see yours is unmuted. If you'd like to go ahead and say something.
Yeah, I was on the finance committee, and after hearing the universities, the research institution, and Dr. Box discuss today in Kim's emotion, I'm very much in favor of letting the institution's boards make their own decisions in light of the crisis that we're experiencing, and bring those back to us in June and let us ratify those.
Thank you, Carol. Dr. Stat?
Yes, I don't know if Travis is on the call or not, but in the legislation that formed the CPE, that sort of thing, and as far as tuition setting goes, does it say we have to have a limit or a ceiling, that we establish a ceiling, or is the open-ended, well, my question is the open-ended legal from our standpoint?
Hey, Dr. Stat. So the statute just says that the council shall determine tuition. It doesn't say how, so it gives you a lot of flexibility in determining how to set tuition.
Okay. Just wanted to dot my I's, cross my T's.
Thank you, Dr. Stat.
I see a hand raised by Carol and Kim. Are those old?
Yes, those are old for Carol.
Okay.
Mine's old.
Yours is old too. Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to provide any input before we'll do a roll call vote on this one? Is there anybody else who would like to provide any input? If so, please
Aaron.
unmute your. Aaron.
If I can figure out how this works. I just want to thank the council for this conversation. I think it's a healthy conversation. I think it's a conversation that we should be having, and we're going to have it in the future, especially around what we do in the new normal. The other item I want to point out just before we move to vote, I appreciate Eli and Neely also pointing out what they're doing for our low-income students. One of the council's big push is how to get more of our students to get where they need to go. Later on, you'll hear a little bit about how we are continuing to close the gap. We're one of the very few states that's doing that in higher education, partially because our institutions, like Eli and Neely and many others, and Dr. Box at Kctcs, they're working hard to make sure those that are the most disenfranchised get to the finish line. So yes, they're responding during this COVID-19, and I'm proud of what they're doing, but I am equally more proud, I guess, if there's such a thing, in what they're doing for overall in Kentucky, and to make sure that all of our citizens have the opportunity to truly get to that ultimate finish line of having a good employment and having a good education to make that happen. So I just wanted to throw that in before we move to a vote and move on.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. I don't see anybody else that would like to provide their thoughts. So Heather, could you call the roll on this motion?
Certainly. Before I do so,
I'm sorry.
yes, the motion I have is for a no cap increase set in 2020-21 only. I'm assuming that the rest would remain the same, which stated the extenuating circumstances portion, I guess, would be removed. However, the part where the committee recommends that the institutions be allowed to submit for council review and approval, market competitive tuition and fee rates for graduate and online courses, as well as tuition and fee rates for non-resident students to comply with council policy and approved MOUs. Does that change at all? That portion of the Finance Committee's recommendation. So that'll be part of this motion, correct?
Correct. Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Hearing that, if everybody can go ahead and just unmute, I will do the roll call. Mr. Beal, you'll need to turn on your video as well.
Heather, I think he had to step away.
Okay. Okay.
He'll abstain, I think.
Okay. Chair Brandsetter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Hellbauer,
Yes.
Mr. Menzer,
Yes.
Mr. Minix is still not with us. Ms. Moore,
Yes.
Ms. Nelson,
Yes.
Mr. Nelson,
Yes.
Ms. Ravichandran,
Yes.
Dr. Stat,
Yes.
Ms. Wright,
Yes.
Mrs. Zimmerman. You're muted. Yes. Okay. All right. It's unanimous.
All right. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Heather, and thank you to everyone for your work in this area. It is 10:45. We have a handful of other items to cover. If maybe we take a 5-minute break, that might help everybody, and come back at 10:50, if that would be good. I'll remind everybody, if you have a wireless headset and are headed to the restroom, take that off, and so you don't have a Leslie Nielsen moment. But so we will see everybody back here in a few minutes, and I'll let. I'm sure the technology will survive it. Thank you. Wayne, can you go ahead and restart the live feed? Great. All right. We're back. Thank you, everyone. At this time, I'd like to move on to some additional items the Finance Committee has reviewed and recommended for approval. First are 5 individual memorandum of understandings on non-resident student tuition between the Council and Eastern Kentucky University, Murray State University, Northern Kentucky University, the University of Louisville, and Western Kentucky University. Each of the MOUs are located in your board materials and each fall within the parameters the Council established in non-resident student tuition policy last fall. The second item is an interim capital project request from Western Kentucky University. The request is for $1.5 million in agency funds to reconfigure 3 classrooms in the Medical Center Health Sciences Complex to create 2 larger classrooms with a minimum of 140 seats. The work is needed to meet the expanding nursing program at WKU and accreditation requirements. Are there any questions on these? I've lost video for most people. If there are no questions, may I have a motion to accept the Finance Committee's recommendations of approval for the 5 MOUs and WKU's interim capital project request?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I got a motion by Ms. Zimmerman and a second by somebody.
That.
Dr. Stat. Okay.
Bob.
Are there any questions associated with this? All right.
Just a comment that if I can just make the comment that the committee structure now is working quite nicely to vet these processes and makes this meeting go much quicker.
Thank you, Dr. Stat. We'll do a voice vote on this one. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. All right, motion carries. Before we move on to the next committee report, I would like to add a report for the council record. As you may remember, at the January 24th meeting, the council delegated authority to the Finance Committee to review KCTCS's interim project request for a scope increase for the Fire Commission's National Responder Preparedness Center parking lot. We'd like to note for the record that the request was reviewed and approved on the council's behalf by the Finance Committee at its February 19th meeting. Lori Harper, the chair of the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee, is unable to join us today, and I'll be presenting her report and the committee's recommendations. The Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee met on March 25th, and the committee received a preview of a sector analysis on engineering supply and demand in Kentucky. Staff anticipate the final report will be released in mid-May, so keep an eye out for that. The committee also reviewed the proposals of 10 new academic programs. Campus representatives discussed each program and answered the committee's questions sufficiently, and the committee is recommending the approval of all 10. Heather has the programs displayed on the slide, but I'll read them out for the record. Eastern Kentucky University, a Master of Social Work. Northern Kentucky University, a Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity. University of Kentucky has the following 8 programs: Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering, Master of Science in Computer Engineering, PhD in Computer Engineering, a Master of Science in Teacher Preparation Program in Visual Impairments, Master of Arts in Orientation and Mobility, a Bachelor of Science in Product Design, Master of Science in Supply Chain Engineering, and a Master of Science in Supply Chain Management. I will note the committee discussed it being unusual that a university submit 8 new programs at one time. Both UK and CP staff stated the programs arose from a needs audit conducted by the university over the past year. Additionally, the programs meet a workplace need as well as student demand, and per our policy, if the pandemic crisis delays the institution's plan to implement the new programs, they will have up to 5 years to do so before going through the program approval process again. On behalf of the committee, the ASI has presented 1 new program at EKU, 1 new program at NKU, and 8 new programs at UK. May I have a motion to accept the committee's approval recommendations?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Nelson and a second by Ms. Hallbauer. Are there any questions associated with these proposals? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the executive committee, which has continued to meet at least monthly. We've covered a lot of ground, and we have 2 items to report and 3 items to recommend for consent approval. First, staff had developed a preliminary timeline for the next statewide strategic agenda. Timeline is included in your materials, and staff anticipate the agenda being ready for adoption at our June 2021 council meeting. While the Academic and Strategic Initiatives Committee will oversee the process, a steering committee comprised of both individual and CPE representatives will be formed to head the development of the agenda. If you are interested in being appointed to that committee, please let me know within the next week. Staff had next, the executive committee approved a redistribution of strategic initiative agency funds to create a COVID-19 emergency response fund. The full council does not need to take action on this since it did not require any additional budgeted funds. Upon approval of an institution's proposal, the fund provides grants in the amount of $40,000 to each of the public universities and $120,000 to Kctcs, which would be distributed out to the individual campuses. Money provided through the grant would be used to help student success efforts during the COVID-19 crisis. The first item the committee recommends for approval is a contract modification to President Thompson's contract. Due to the complexity of the position and difficulty to quantitatively measure long-term strategic impact on an annual basis, the committee approved to remove the annual incentive compensation provisions from the contract and increase his base annual salary to $340,000. This modification essentially equates his base pay with the actual pay he received this year when considering both base and incentive pay earned. It is also below the limit set by the statute. The second item the committee recommends for approval is the 2020-2021 meeting calendar. Those dates were sent to you a few weeks ago to review and can be found in your board materials. While we know that some of you may have some conflicts, it seems the majority are able to move forward as they are planned. And the last item the committee recommends for approval is an amendment to 13 KAR 150 for licensed out-of-state colleges eligibility for the Kentucky tuition grant. There are a number of revisions to this, but essentially the proposed language aligns the standards for participation with the SAC COC principles of accreditation that went into effect on January 1, 2018. If approved, it will authorize council staff to file the proposed administrative regulation with the LRC and proceed with that standard process. May I have a motion to accept the committee's approval recommendations, which have been summarized on your screen?
So moved.
Second.
I'll give Dr. Staff the motion and Mr. Mentzner the second.
I'm
is
sorry,
there any? This is tough. Are there any questions or discussions associated with this report? We'll do a voice vote on this. All those in favor say aye.
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 Hi.
All those opposed, no. The motion carries. Thank you everyone for your efforts on that. Dr. Stat, I'm going to turn it over to you as the report on the Committee of Equal Opportunities. As chair of the CEO, would you like to go ahead and give your report, please?
Actually, I have no report per se, other than the fact that we have received new proposals from each of the universities and community colleges. They are being scored or have been scored at the present time. They're being collated into a package, and we will meet Monday to discuss them, go over them, and hopefully approve the different diversity plans from each of the schools. But right now, we're just waiting till Monday's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stat. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Stat?
I just make a comment. I just wanted to thank him for his service in that capacity over the past year or so, since he's become very involved. I have definitely received lots of positive feedback on his leadership there. So thank you, Bob.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Next item on the agenda is
Aaron
item-
has.
Can I say
Oh, I'm sorry.
before we move forward?
Go ahead.
First of all, Christy took my thunder away, so thanks, Christy. But Bob, Dr. Stad has performed. If you guys haven't been to any of these meetings, you should have. I've seen it. I've been doing this now for decades and been in charge of it at the council for the last 11, 12 years. This is the best run meeting that I've seen. We have developed a staff at CPE with Dawn Offit at the lead and Travis really taking the vice presidential role. We are doing more in this area than any state by far, but CPE has really stepped up to the plate. And Dr. Stad, I want to thank you personally, as I agree with Ms. Nelson that you are doing a better than wonderful job. So thank you, and to the staff and Travis, Dawn, and all of her group for really making some of these things happen in the campuses, for responding to it. So thank you, Ms.
Well, thanks.
So as
thank
a
you.
committee
Appreciate
member,
that.
I would say, nice job, Bob. Thanks for all you're doing.
Well, thank you. Actually, the committee that is there and the work groups that we have put together for these reviews, they're doing an incredible job because, well, I counted up the pages I have, about 150 pages of material to review for these diversity plans for the different schools. And each subcommittee member is doing about the same. And it's just a time-consuming but very rewarding effort to see how much the schools are doing. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item 9, the 2020 progress report. Council staff have worked diligently producing the statutorily required annual progress report, and you can find that document in your board materials. At this time, I'll ask David Mahan to provide us with highlights of that report.
Hi, good morning. Okay, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, yes.
So, of course, we're in very different times as we think about the report of the 2020 progress report. We did debate whether it was an appropriate time to give an update, given that these metrics are through the past academic year and some are in the current academic year. Certainly, as we plan for the next strategic agenda in 2021, we want to begin to really better understand and assess our strengths and weaknesses at the state higher education system. Also, this provides us an interesting benchmark, a new baseline, if you will, before we go through the reopening of campuses and this whole pandemic challenge. So with that, I'm going to just give you some general highlights of the report. I want to point out that Melissa Young on our communication staff has done tremendous work in data entry and design and writing of this report. And so I want to give her a big thanks, and she would be available to jump in for some of her insights as needed. I also talk about Travis Muncie on my team and Carrie Hodge did a tremendous amount of work. All said, this is about 18 assessment areas across the strategic agenda groupings that you guys know, which is opportunity, success, and impact. So it's about 1,000 cells of data. So it's a bit of a mini data book within this progress report. but it's also very readable. It's graphical interfaces. And we rolled out a new interactive dashboard that will be public facing online so that you can quickly assess scorecards by individual campuses. And given enough time, I'll just give you a brief overview of that online system as well. As you guys know from the president's reports in December, we had a really good year in terms of reproduction and educational attainment. So probably our biggest highlight there is that our number of underrepresented minority degrees and certificates is up. And we will continue to monitor that, but that's been a focus of this council and certainly council staff. We do improve with graduation rates, and we'll cover that in short in a short summary. Our in-state college going rate remains a challenge, and of course, funding and the cost of students and affordability also remain challenging areas. So first, the attainment. We know our 60 by 30 attainment goal, and we know that we are approaching the national average, which is certainly a good news slide. This is census data from our working age population of 25 to 64, showing the proportion of Kentuckians with a post-secondary certificate or greater. So that would be certificate, associate, baccalaureate, all the way to a graduate degree. You can see in 2014 that we were about 3 percentage points below the national. And by 2018, this latest release of the census data, we're about half of that, 1.5 percentage points below the national. So that is certainly the good news. And much of this is around our certificate production at Kctcs, the short-term certificates. But we do also need to advise council that there is work to do in this attainment goal. And that's primarily because we remain behind, significantly behind the national average when we look at associate degree completers and higher. So the way it's measured in census is we can disaggregate by race only at the associate degree and higher, and not at the certificate level. And so you can see significant gaps do exist between Kentucky and the national at the associate degree level and higher. And then you can see those gaps are significant when we look at the race breakdowns. Not only are we 12 percentage points below with our white folks, our white demographic, we are also below with our African American, and there's a gap between Kentucky whites and Kentucky blacks. So we really need to continue to focus not only on overall certificate numbers, but also to better understand that the leaders of tomorrow, the higher skill folks that are earning associate degrees or higher, we have significant work to do. We're about 7 points below the national average. In terms of degree production, and I believe most of you guys have seen this slide, we are on track to continue progress towards our 2030 goal. This latest year of 18-19, we grew at 3.5 percentage points, 3.5% average annual growth rate, greater than our 2017-18 number. So as an unduplicated count, that's 42,179 completers. So we track this very carefully to make sure that we're producing enough graduates to stay on track, which we have calculated is about 1.7% average annual growth rate to remain, to continue to make progress. The highlights from that credential production year of 2018-19, you see the 6% increase in Kctcs certificates. That's what's really carrying the water for us. But also Kctcs is up with associate degrees, which has not necessarily been the case in previous years. So that's also a good news slide. The bigger challenge that we're running into here is baccalaureate level or higher. So as the U of L and UK presidents communicated to the council that there has been much progress made over the last 5 years. This previous year was very flat in terms of baccalaureate degree production, and so we'll want to keep a close eye on that. The increase in graduate degrees is mostly around IQ, our private, not-for-profit institutions. Several campuses are offering online masters in focused areas such as computer science, and that is giving us a big boom in graduate degrees, but at the public universities, it's pretty flat. As I noted from the beginning of the report, our number of underrepresented minority students completing degrees increased by 6.3%. You can see that we're up in at Kctcs and up in baccalaureate degrees, even though the overall is flat. The number of students of color completing are up, and the number of graduate degrees is also up with our students of color. So really an important takeaway here that we are reaching more of our minority students. We are flat with low income credentials, or actually decreasing slightly. I believe that is more a function of enrollment and a stronger economy where we had fewer low income adults that did enroll, but it's something we will have to keep a close eye on. In terms of graduation rates, and this is one of the reasons that we're seeing an uptick in degree production, Kctcs again improved its graduation rate. This is about 3 percentage points this year, from 31 to almost 34%. You can see that national average sits right at 24%. So this is certainly something that there's a big accomplishment for our partners at Kctcs and their community college campuses. The gaps were closed further for low income students with a 2.4% gap. So their number there was 31.5% in 2018-19. Unfortunately, this is some challenging news here with the URM group, that the gap did increase in terms of graduation rate for 2018-19 with the underrepresented minority. That went from 42.7% to 43.4%, which is an increase, but it did not increase with the same amount as the overall. And so it's still a challenging area for students of color completion at Kctcs. The opposite effect is having in that is at the four-year public universities, more underrepresented minority students are completing, and that gap is decreasing. As you can see, it was at 11.8%, the gap here at 2017-18, and it's gone to 11.5% here at 2018-19. The overall rate did increase by 0.5 percentage points, so they are going in the right direction. However, we remain about 5 percentage points below the national average. President Thompson discusses this often with local school boards and our campuses. Our college going rate for in-state students has continued to decline and decrease, and you can see another year where it did decrease from 53% to 51.7%. And if you drill down with race and ethnicity, you can see it's certainly even more problematic for our students of color, our African American and Hispanic students. This slide, I hesitated to include this slide given that this number is going to change dramatically in the summer and fall as we begin approaching unemployed adults in the workforce from a Kentucky workforce. But it is serve as a nice baseline to show you that we continue to decrease in the number of adults enrolled, about a 17% decrease over the last 3 years, which puts us in a place of about 2.6% of the total population that does not have a credential in Kentucky that's enrolled. So we want to keep a close eye on that. about 70,000 adults would be needed to meet this 4% overall enrollment number. And if the Great Recession numbers are any indication, that number may be a possibility for us in the coming years, year to 2 years. And then my final slide is to show you net price, which is something that we keep a close eye on. This is a very different metric than what was presented by the U of L and UK presidents, as well as Dr. Box at Kctcs. This is an overall look at the whole cost of attendance with room, board, transportation, basically everything it takes to survive while you're in school. And it's full-time in-state students. You can see the cost of attendance less all the grant aid from institutions, state and federal sources gives you a final number. And you can see that the 4-year comprehensive institutions were very flat for these years from 12-13 to 15-16. But now this uptick continues. And so this latest year was 7.7%. From 11.2 to 12.1, which is something to keep a close eye on. The research universities have stabilized a good bit here with a very minimal increase, and Kctcs continues to do, really a fantastic job of keeping this price down for their population. It is noteworthy that about 2/3 of their population are in fact Pell eligible. Low-income students from low-income families. So that is a quick look at the 2020 progress report. It's about 40 pages. It has many important infographics in it, and I hope that folks can spend a little time with it. I know we got many other things going right now, but we do think it's a powerful baseline tool to show us where we are right now in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis. Chair Brandon, open up for questions.
Okay, David, I have a question or two. This is Bob Stat, and on the closing the gap with underrepresented minorities, particularly
Yes.
that group. It's not so much a question as a statement, but the new diversity plans and the approach that we've taken is just now starting to take hold within many of the schools, both universities and community colleges. And the reports this year came out much improved over last year, but they're also starting to show improvement. So I expect those numbers to be significantly impacted by the implementation of the new diversity plans. But that's a future aspect since these have only been going for a year to 2 years.
Yes, and Dr. Stats, I will take this opportunity to plug our diversity dashboard. My staff, Travis Muncie, has worked very hard on that, and so folks can monitor that closely in terms of those quantitative measures online in our data center. So I thank you for that, and I hope you're right in terms of continued improvement in many of those critical areas.
Chair Brandstetter, let me say a couple of things to the council. I think I know you're aware of it if you've read the report, but I just want to point it out. Many of our students coming out of K-12, the gaps have increased, and that's very problematic. As we think about what we need to do in degree attainment as a whole, we have to look at it in a pipeline sort of way from early childhood through post-secondary. And one of the issues that we have is that we have some significant gaps still occurring in K-12. We do have gaps in higher ed that's occurring. We're trying to close them a little bit, and we've been fairly successful in moving in that direction. The issue is college going rate. This college going rate at the level it's decreasing is very problematic. I bring this up to the Kentucky Board of Education all the time, as well as the gap issue. And somehow this council, not sure exactly what we do, but we have to discuss what this means, because for us to get to the 60 by 30, we're going to have to look at every mechanism we have in place, the adult learner, as well as getting more people into the pipeline. And one of the things our Garrett folk are doing this year, I'll give them a call out. They are reaching out unbelievably so during this time of making sure our seniors, they're even delivering class of 2020 to their seniors, put it in their yard so they can think about that. You don't stop in high school. You move on to a community college or a four-year institution to get what you need to get. And so the discussion somewhere along the way is about how do we make what we're giving really applicable to the populations that may not see higher education as being important. And so my hope is, and this is going to affect us, no doubt about it, this pandemic, but some of the items that this progress report points out is that this pipeline is somewhat leaking and leaking heavily. And our chamber is pointing that out too. So my hope is that we can pick up this in our strategic discussion as we move into this coming year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Thank you, David, for that presentation. And there's when you get a chance to look at your onboard, the full report is on there, and the full content. Are there any other questions or comments that people have for David?
Actually, let me just, I don't know if I'm muted. I wasn't. Okay. One of the things that I've noted in the 4 different schools that I reviewed for their diversity plans, every one of them has an outreach or reaching down into the high schools as part of their program to emphasize just what Aaron was talking about. So each of the universities that I worked with have recognized that and have plans in place. That's it.
Somebody else had a
Yeah,
started
I was just
talking
going to
also.
say that I really appreciate the work that's gone into this. I think it's a great report, and I know that it's continued to evolve, and I really think it's very helpful, and it's a great way to be able to sort of share the story in ways that people understand the impact that's being made across the state. So thank you for all the work. I know that's not easy, and compared to where we started, however many years ago I started, you've come a really long way, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I would encourage everybody to take, if you have any additional thoughts on this, jot down a few notes or questions. I've got a few follow-ups that I'll be sending over to David, and hopefully we can make some time at our June retreat to dig into that information, that content, and maybe delve a little bit deeper into some manners and ways that we can help pull those triggers and levers to improve the overall outcomes. Is everybody else spoken? I just want to make sure we open the floor up as much as possible. All right, we are on item 10 of our agenda. Before we adjourn today, we have 2 council resolutions to consider adopting. First is a resolution for Brandon Wilson, who was a fellow council member over the last year. He unfortunately was unable to continue his service due to work demands, but we appreciate his service. And you can see his resolution in your materials today. The second will be presented to Reese Stagnolia, who is the executive director for Kentucky Adult Education. He retired after many years of service to our state's hardest to reach populations, and is still highly valued and recognized for his work. His resolution is also included in your materials, and I'm disappointed we can't all be here in the same room to thank him for his service individually and in person. But we'll get back to that. Do I have a motion to approve these, please?
Motion.
Motion by Carol. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Nelson. All right, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. In addition, several motion carries, and thank you to Heather for pulling those together. Several of the campuses have provided written reports in your materials, so please review those if you have not already. Does anyone have anything additional they would like to address before we adjourn today? and just to refresh everybody's memory, on the screen now are upcoming council and committee meetings between now and our council retreat and business meeting towards the end of June.
I dare say this year's council retreat may not be as fun as the other ones have been.
Let's have, we'll have hope on that, Cheryl, we'll see. But yeah, I think that we have some fun things possibly planned, but we'll see if we're able to pull that stuff off.
We have not, I will say, we've not been kicked out of our location yet. They are
Great.
allowing us to keep it. So I'm crossing fingers that we are able to socially distantly retreat away from our homes.
Where is it?
Currently scheduled at Cumberland Falls State Park.
Yeah.
We can toast 10 feet away. You know, Chair Branstetter, I'd like to say a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank the council members for your faith, consistent faith with me and what we're doing. And hopefully we're keeping you informed at times, I'm sure more informed than you'd like, but we want to continue doing that. I want to make sure I thank my staff who's been, once again, working hard, Lee, Travis, Bill, you know, Melissa, all of their staff and doing their job. But especially, I will say that having the discussions we've been having in our committee meetings, I would be remiss if I didn't say that they are good and powerful, and they're the kind of communication that you guys asked for when we first came on board. So whoever said it earlier, I think it was Dr. Stat, about how the committee meetings are working. From my viewpoint, as someone who's done a lot of these in a lot of different places, I think they're working great. So I just want to throw that in and once again, thank the council for your support, but not just for me and my staff, but all of higher education. So thanks.
All right, thank you, Dr. Thompson. One last item, just want to remind everybody the work is continuing on at CPE. We have several committee meetings planned for May and June, as you can see. We will continue to utilize the Zoom conference, teleconference, and YouTube live streams options until we're given other guidance by the governor. The full council is scheduled to come back together for our annual retreat on June 18th and 19th at Cumberland Falls State Park. And we'll obviously keep everybody more informed as we move on, get closer to those dates. Just want to thank everybody for watching if you were on YouTube, and thank you for your interest and attention today. Everyone stay safe and well in your homes. Unless there's an objection, I'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
And if I can paraphrase an old country saying, you know, see you next time, good Lord willing, and the fever don't rise.
Thank you, Dr. Stat.